guys, we are back with another episode of Find Your Film. I am with the Bruce Perko. If you're watching our YouTube video for Find Your Film, the Bruce Perko, aka Bruce Perky. There's a reason why he's called the Bruce Perko. And then I have Holmes Dark the Night, which is a play on a film called So Dark the Night. The person who called himself Holmes Dark the Night is, by the way, it's Holmes, Holmes, is Eric Holmes, who has always interesting picks. That does not mean you have boring picks. Bruce Perko, you have very interesting picks as well. That is Bruce Perky. He is the movie reviewer over at Rustomire, the YouTube channel. So we make up the crew, the ragtag, ramshackle. What other R's can we? Robust? Are we still robust? The robust crew.
Ribald. We're ribald.
Yeah, the ribald. Ooh, ribald.
Rapacious. Romanesque.
Romanesque. I like that. I was gonna say repost, R-I-P-O-S-T-E, but I don't even know what that means. Is that food or rest? What does anyone know what that means? Which? Repast? Repost? Repast? I don't know. We're done with the
Regalia.
R's. Which one?
Repose.
Regalia.
Regalia. Yeah, this episode, we're gonna have a regalia of things to say. And I used the word incorrectly, Eric Holmes Dark Tonight. I apologize. We're gonna talk about Joseph H. Lewis. I am so excited. This is my pick, my Find Your Film pick for our director spotlight. We started off our podcast actually with Eric Holmes, our first episode, talking about William Friedkin with Killer Joe. The next episode, we went into a deep dive with a couple of other Friedkin movies like Good Times and The People versus Paul Crump and Sorcerer, and Bruce Perky did Bava and Argento. So now this week we're doing Joseph H. Lewis. Now the two films we are spotlighting for this episode are actually, I decided not, Joseph H. Lewis's most popular film is one movie. It's Gun Crazy. Everyone talks about Gun Crazy as the pinnacle of film noir. When you think of noir from the 40s and 50s, you think Gun Crazy. You think what else? Out of the Past. Can you guys name other film noirs that you think, Holmes Dark Tonight, that are very popular? Out of the Past, what else?
What, just noirs in general?
Noirs in general from yesteryear. I guess Gun Crazy would be the top.
The Third Man.
I'm literally completely blank now.
The Third Man, yes, The Third Man, which co-stars Ali Davali, who co-starred in Suspiria, which we covered last week. Don't worry, we're going to be talking about a lot of noirs.
I mean, The Maltese Falcon is obviously a big one.
Right. So Gun Crazy is one of the biggest, actually the most popular film from Joseph H. Lewis. The movies we are spotlighting today is The Big Combo, made in 1955, and So Dark the Night, released in 1946. Now, before we even get into those movies, Holmes Dark the Night, Eric Holmes, I assigned you guys Joseph H. Lewis. You were able to watch those two movies. Your overall thoughts about Joseph H. Lewis as a director, what did you get just from those two films, your impression of him?
Well, they seem pretty sort of by the numbers on the surface. But then he does certain things that, and we'll probably get into it later, but like the Big Combo was one in particular that had a scene where he said something, there's a certain turn of events, and a guy goes, "You won't hear the gunfire."
Right.
And then the sound cuts out, and all you see is the gun blast, but you don't hear anything. Yes. And that just, and I could be wrong, and I often am, but it seemed like something that is more of a modern sort of technique.
Yes.
I didn't think they did something like that back then, and apparently they did because he did it. But that, and then what was it? So Dark the Night. There's one of the characters. He's a certain thing happens, and he's sitting at a table, and he leans forward. Leans forward, and the lights go down, and then a light comes up like right under his face. It's like a visual representation of passage of time and introspection of his character.
Yes,
and so it's weird because on like I said, on the surface, his movies seem very by the numbers, but then he has little flourishes like that in it where it's like, holy crap, this is really interesting what he's doing here. And he kind of sprinkles it in, and when he sprinkles it in, it's like you watch a horror movie that's kind of not that these are horror movies, but you'll watch a horror movie that's kind of slow pace, but then when the violence kicks in, it's like, whoa. It really hits you. He's just kind of by the numbers. He just kind of takes his time, but he chooses his moments to have these little flourishes in there, and those flourishes absolutely work when they come up.
I am not Joseph H. Lewis, but I think we can end that episode. That is the whole gist of the episode. That is exactly what I was trying to say. We can wrap it up, and we can go now and watch the NBA playoffs. I'm done. Joseph H. Lewis, Bruce Perky. Sorry, we'll get you later. But that was some great stuff on Joseph H. Lewis. But before we get to you, I just wanted to read a quote from Joseph H. Lewis. This was an interview that he did with Peter Bogdanovich back in the 60s. They met twice, I think back in the 60s and back in the early 90s. These two interviews took place at his yacht in Marina del Rey, but he said, and I quote, "I signed my name to every frame of film," which is pretty dramatic for him to say that and pretty boastful. And I'm just wondering, Bruce, what did you get from the first two movies? Did you feel he was an auteur, or do you think maybe I'm overhyping Joseph H. Lewis a little bit too much?
No, I'm right in line with Eric. I feel like what Eric's getting at is exactly what I saw too, which is in both movies you have some very strong conventional types of stories. So he goes into these conventional types of stories, and at first he seems to kind of follow along the line of all the conventions, and then slowly, either through side characters or through shots like Eric mentioned, or through different sort of plot elements, he kind of upends or twists these kind of standardized types of like plots. And I think that's something that struck me a lot in both movies, along with some of the character stuff. And there's some great character stuff, especially the big combo that I want to talk about.
Ooh.
But yeah, and shots and all the shot stuff that Eric said is right on point too.
Before we get our first film that we're going to cover is So Dark the Night, released in 1946. But before we get that, a couple of Joseph H. Lewis factoids. He grew up the son of an optometrist. So, I mean, his father knew a thing about vision, right? So what he'd do actually is his father would work as an optometrist up in New York, and he'd go into the city late at night. His father would work late at night. His mother would make just fresh home-cooked meals for her husband, who was working late into the night. And Lewis would actually take the subway into town and give the meal to his dad late at night. And sometimes what he'd do is on the subway train and on the walk towards his father, he would just fantasize and daydream about images. And one would think that, just all of the daydreams or maybe the night dreams that would come into Joseph H. Lewis's head as a kid living in New York, maybe that fed him as a filmmaker. When he grew up in his, I guess, early 20s, he wanted to become an actor. He went to Hollywood. His older brother was an editor for one of the film studios. So he started in the business working as a film loader for Metro, aka MGM, Metro Goldwyn Mayer. So that's his first job, learning learning how to actually cut film from his brother. He became an assistant editor for a while, film loader turned assistant editor. He actually was there. Eric Holmes, you love time traveling with all your interesting picks from yesteryear. As you know, I'm thinking about all the picks you did for Movie Mainline and now with Find Your Film. This would interest you. He actually literally witnessed, as a film loader in MGM and as an editor, assistant editor, he witnessed the transition from silent film to sound. So he was right there. He was one of those filmmakers, and that generation, they saw that transition. And I think maybe a big reason why he had a lot of that visual prowess is because he was able to see the best of both worlds, and he was educated in silent film. Now, do you guys, I mean, you guys, when one of you guys can talk about this, do you think a silent film today, watching it, is a good education for any kind of filmmaker as far as how to compose images or even tell a story? Because I'm not really well-versed in that genre. do you think that's a very important thing to watch as far as
I, I
learning?
wouldn't say it's not only important. I would say it's necessary. As we all know, film is visual medium. And when you watch old silent films, that's exactly what they have to tell a story without sound. They can't lean on exposition. It's pure, I mean, they're pure action movies, not like necessarily explosions and car chases and everything, but the whole story in silent films, the whole story needs to be told by action. Even come down to writing a script. If you don't have dialogue, you have to convey everything through action. So if if you're brought up on silent film, um, and then you move into the talkies, I would imagine that the sound is a new tool you get to use, but you've already cut your teeth on the basics, which is, just action and, silent film, the show don't tell because you can't tell at that point. And then once they bring up the technology of sound, which oddly enough, we'll get into on a future director spotlight. but
Teaser slash half a teaser there. I like that.
Yeah. If you cut your teeth on the silent films, that's all and then all of a sudden you have this new tool you get to use. It'd be like I don't know, what's a good example? Like probably 3D, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, they've had 3D for a while, but like, you get used to making normal movies, and now you get to do 3D. So here's a new tool we get to use. Let's see how we can
black and
add
white
this
and color would be an obvious one, right? Going from black and white to color, you'd have to change entirely, or going to widescreen, like when they actually had the widescreen ability. So I think some of those things made a big difference too.
That I also think, like, I know Citizen Kane gets a lot of backlash for, everyone says it's like the greatest movie ever made. And I think a lot of people look at the content of the story of Citizen Kane, but they don't realize, without fully appreciating what that movie, the new tools the movie introduced. And we talked about Evil Dead kind of did the same thing. It's like, it just, these movies kind of bring in new tools, and sound's just a new tool. But if you can take out all the tools in your toolbox and just go with the basics, which is silent movies, just a camera and people moving in front of it. If you can tell a story like that, you can tell a story with anything. And then just adding more tools to that will enhance that. I'm talking too much.
No, very good. Speaking of telling a story, our first film for this episode is So Dark the Night. Again, 1946.
So dark. You can't even believe how dark it is. So dark.
it's so very dark tonight. It is even darker than Holmes' Dark Tonight. It is very, very dark. Well, anyways, the plot line for this movie, it's centers on this police detective / inspector named Henri Cassan, played by Stephen Garay. He was a character actor. This is probably, I guess, for stateside U.S. viewers like us, this is his most popular film. He's Henri Cassan. He's a hardworking French detective. He's very popular. He's kind of like he knows how to solve a crime. He's the smartest one in the bunch. He is world renowned, or I guess renowned in France, because when he takes a vacation, a much needed 2-week vacation in this quiet Parisian village, even the innkeepers know who this Henri Cassan is. But the thing with Cassan is he's middle-aged. He's probably as old as me and Bruce Perky. Eric Holmes, you're the young guy in the bunch, so we're not going to lump you in as one of the old guys. You're still the youngin'. So
my back does hurt a lot, though.
Okay. Well, you're going to learn. You're going to learn in about 5-6 years. Come talk to us about getting older. Henri Cassan knows this because he thinks his life is over. He thinks he's just dedicated to his job, but he ends up falling in love with this young girl who is the daughter of the innkeepers. This happily married couple. They own the inn. They have a nice daughter. She's very young. I think Eric Holmes thinks she's a little bit younger, and we're going to talk about that. But he's also middle-aged, so that's a weird thing. And so they end up falling in love. The problem is she is actually promised to another man in the village. That she's been promised to this young man since they were children, and that's a love triangle. And you think this movie is only 70 minutes. For the first, I would say 40% of the film, it's a really sweet love story, bittersweet love story about a man who is
Or
might
creepy.
creepy. You're not coming in the right. Maybe I'm really actually showing my. Maybe I'm a little bit more attached to Henri Cassan than Bruce is, because Bruce Perky is a normal human being and I'm a little bit dysfunctional. But I thought Cassan was a very likable person, and he falls in love, but then something happens. I don't know. Bruce and Eric, you can go wherever you want to go with this, but it goes from a love story and a romance, or maybe, as Bruce says, might be a little bit of a creepy romance. Eric, you're going to talk about the creepy romance as well, but it turns into a murder investigation because he's a police detective inspector. That's his job. He ends up the rest of the film trying to figure out a dastardly, a tragic murder that occurs in this village. So that is the ultimate premise of So Dark the Night. Bruce Perky, I've been yapping. Just thoughts on this movie.
Well,
Did you love it? Did flaws? What did you think overall?
I liked it. I didn't like it as much although as I sat with it, I've liked it a little bit more even since I saw it a few days ago. What I was going to say is I talked about how the unpredictable kind of plotting that we see with both these movies, and this is a perfect example where it starts out and it's like the setup is very clear. You know, this is our best detective. You know, he can't be stopped. He gets every man he goes after. He's on the hunt. He's a machine. And then the next shot is him kind of just taking his time, walking down the street, stopping to get a shoe shine. And they're like, where is he? What's happened to him? And then off he goes to his vacation. So right out of the gate, you're like, what is this movie? Like, it's kind of confusing, right?
Yeah.
You think like, because you're thinking, hey, we're going to be watching a mystery or a crime drama or something, because that's how they set it up. And then you end up kind of, like you said, plopping into this love story. So I think that right out of the gate, it's confusing to the viewer a little bit, or a little bit, it upends your expectations. So you're not really sure what you're supposed to be going with. So as we start to meet all these characters, it's really interesting. Now, we'll get into the creepy or not creepy aspect of it. There's definitely the first shot. You have the shot of her hanging the clothing on the line, I think is what we have. And he's driving up to the little inn or whatever it is. And we have to mention also the awesome tracking shot that goes into the into the inn. That's beautiful.
Yes.
But you know, she's revealed and she's like, this beautiful young, French woman, young girl. And there's this long shot, a couple shots of him just staring at her, like leering at her.
Wait, I thought those were normal shots. Eric Holmes, were those normal shots, or am I just a creep?
Oh, yeah.
You're with me, Eric. I know you're with me. Follow me up on this.
I didn't say which one I was agreeing with.
Well, you just better tell us now.
Yes, tell us, Eric. Was it a creep? Did you get that creepy vibe from Henri Cassan right from the get-go, which is a very good observation?
Not at first. It wasn't until I was watching the movie and I was starting to think, because the actress in the movie is, older than what she's portraying. And I just thought of this like just now. It's called So Dark the Night. And there's a song called Into the Night that starts, she's just 16 years old. Leave her alone.
I've based all my human love relationships on that Benny Mardones song. I will be arrested pretty soon, so you might have to find a new host next week if I air this.
Jokes.
No, great song though.
It is.
Rest in peace, Mardones. Yeah.
But yeah, I got the sense that so you got the girl, and I think she's playing a character younger than what the actress, like a lot younger. At least that's what I got the sense of. And it didn't hit me right away. It kind of, I was like, wait, she's living with her parents. and like, you know, she's kind of got a curfew, and there's things that the actress is doing that wouldn't make sense for if she was an older woman. The parents wouldn't, you know, act certain ways towards her. So I got the sense that she was a lot younger than she was supposed to be. And then she has her boyfriend, and then the detective comes around and he kind of falls in love with her. And so I was like, yeah, I don't know. But
and then he falls in love with her, and then the guy comes and says like, hey, leave her alone. We've been, you know, betrothed and going together and in love since we were kids. And then he's like, okay. And then he comes back to her. It's kind of like, you know?
Yeah. That and I was going to bring up, I brought up before we started recording, there seemed to be a lot of that back in the day. It almost seemed normalized for a middle-aged man to be dating like even if she was 18, you know, if you're Sean Penn dating what's his name's daughter? Vincent D'Onofrio's daughter. It's like, I get it. She's of age and she's an adult and she can make her decisions, but you get into kind of weird territory. But I guess back in the day, that stuff was kind of normalized, because you think of Elvis Presley, Roman Polanski. I mean, obviously he's known as a pedophile, but
yes.
Jerry Lewis, like that. there's you know, older stars and rock stars and whatnot back in the day that, I don't know, maybe that was just the way things were back then and people were cool with it.
Well, this movie actually does play with the idea too, right? Because it has some sides are going like, hey, he's famous. This is a great opportunity, excitement. Go out with this rich, established man instead of this other young dude. And then the other side is like, no, you're too old for her. You should be here with the, you know, the younger man who's always loved you. So they kind of do deal with it a little bit, I guess, in the story.
Well, the one guy goes up to him before or when they were getting engaged. The one guy just says, "You're too old to be getting married." Like,
the father.
Not that you're too old for him. I got the sense that it was, you're too old to be getting married. Full stop. Like,
right.
you've made it this far. Just keep on going. Stay single. You know. Bang it out if you have to, but just, you know.
Well, and they even make a point. They make a point of introducing, you know, the widow.
Are you talking to me or the character? No, I'm sorry, Bruce.
Yes. They make the point of introducing the widow as like the, you know, the age appropriate, perfect person that he could end up with, you know. As right out the gate, they even show that, you know, so they you know, kind of have it as there is an option there for him.
Very good point. Yeah, Bruce, listeners, what Bruce is talking about, there are the innkeepers, and there's someone who actually helps manage the inn, and she is age appropriate to the Henri Cassin character, but he treats her like she doesn't even exist, but she's the one who in real you know, maybe I can learn a thing or two about So Dark Tonight myself, just as a human being, because I feel, well, there's a couple things I don't relate to, but I don't want to talk about it. But that character is age appropriate for the Henri Cassin character. I really ended up, a couple more things. This movie, it's supposedly shot in Paris. It's a cheap movie. It's a low budget movie. So they shot this movie. They created the sets out of the back lot somewhere here in Canoga Park, California, which is deep in the heart of the San Fernando Valley. So, I mean, it's not a big trickery thing, but I think it's still impressive that if you're gonna set a movie in Paris and a friend, and it didn't really take you out. I don't know. Did the locations take you out of anything? No, you felt.
I felt like it. I mean, I believed it. I bought it.
Yeah. And I've seen this movie, I think, 3 times. So there's some really cool visual foreshadowings in So Dark Tonight. We barely, because we don't want to spoil too much. It, like Eric was saying, it does get really, really dark. Eric, when it gets really, really dark, do you think the movie ramps it up a level, or do you feel like Bruce, where it's, you know, it's a nice movie, it's 70 minutes, but do you think it upscales when it gets darker?
Well, I think certainly, beyond the creepy or not creepy portion of it, it starts off as a regular love story, and that's what I thought it was gonna be. And so the title "So Dark the Night," I was like, that's kind of an interesting title for a love story. And then when the movie kind of kicks into gear and you figure out what it is, and then it probably around the halfway point, it kind of starts getting a little darker and darker, and the night becomes darker and darker and darker, so on and so forth. But yeah, it definitely hits a point. I don't really want to say much more than that because it starts giving stuff away. I would say this movie is it's not what you think it is right off the bat, and it keeps not becoming that towards the end, and it gets we'll say it gets a little I don't know if it's ahead of its time because I haven't seen enough movies around that era.
Yeah.
But I would say it goes places that I would not expect a movie from that time to go. We'll leave it there.
I'm going to say something. It's not going to spoil it because it's not going to be specific enough. But I wonder if you guys agree. I think probably the ending of this movie highly influenced the ending of a certain Hitchcock movie. I'm not going to say which one, but there's some certain elements right towards the end of this movie that are very similar to what happens at the end of a certain Hitchcock movie, especially in the way that certain people's personalities are explained. I guess I'll say it at that, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I can actually think of a couple, but yes, they all work. So yeah.
Well,
there's one really in specific that I'm thinking of, but we will leave it at that.
We'll leave it at that. Well, to that point, Bruce, you were talking about the tracking shot at the beginning when he comes to the inn. Again, Eric, you're talking about filmmakers of that day. A normal filmmaker would have probably used that, maybe would have just done a quick 2-shot or maybe a shot of him getting out the carriage and it cuts to him right inside the inn, but they do the tracking shot. Bruce, did this movie upscale a little bit, improve a little bit, because did you appreciate all of the interesting visual stuff that the movie?
Yeah, I did. And I especially also really liked the shot that Eric called out later on where the lighting changes.
Yes.
I thought that was beautiful. And it looked to be done in real time, like just lighting on the set in the camera. Like it didn't look like it was an edit. And
they didn't use CGI, so.
Well, I mean, it didn't look like it was like it didn't look like they cut or they like relit it and like cut to it. It looked like they just literally changed the lighting on the fly and then changed out of the lighting on the fly from what I could tell in that shot, which was super impressive. And just like you said, it was a very modern sort of movement in that moment because it was like so like almost expressionistic or surrealistic to be in this movie that was generally pretty grounded. Like this is not a Bava movie, or like we talked about before, this is not some weird, horror movie. It just had this moment where it just kind of goes for it, and I love that.
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen this movie several times. I don't know if you guys saw in this research, he started off making Westerns in, I guess, the late 30s, and they called him, you guys will appreciate this, they called him Wagon Wheel Joe. And do you have any idea why they would call him Wagon Wheel Joe? Do you have any thoughts? Why would they call him Wagon Wheel Joe?
Did he track everything on his cameras on a wagon or something? I don't know.
Close. Eric, your guess. What do you think?
Well, his name wasn't Joe, so right away I'm confused.
Well, the reason why
Joseph.
He was called Wagon Wheel Joe was
there you go.
because, he even admitted, first of all, he even admitted with all those years as an editor, when he ended up directing, even through his directing journey, it took him a while to realize, he even admits this, he said, I had no idea that actors were important. He really said, he thought it was all about the camera. And Eric, to your point with silent cinema, it's about moving the images. So it's always about the moving image to him. And he goes, I realized that you really need the actors really improve a story. So the reason why they called him Wagon Wheel Joe, and this is why I'm so in love with Joseph H. Lewis, he's my Brian De Palma of the 30s and 40s and 50s, is whenever they would have cowboys come into the westerns, okay, and they weren't actors. If a cowboy had a horse and it's a low budget western, that cowboy would probably get a line or two in the movie just as sort of creative payment for having that horse and being in the shot. So whenever he saw an actor or dialogue that wasn't just really well done and he hated it, he'd have that actor say the line behind a wagon wheel. So the camera would be shot through the wagon wheel, and it would just make it look like a more interesting shot, just to shield the bad actor. So people would be focusing on the visual spectacle of the wagon wheel instead of the bad cowboy actor or bit actor trying to say dialogue. Like De Palma, he hated dialogue. So he just wanted the visual stuff.
To that point, well, first of all, his name wasn't Joe. That is one of many egregious mistakes I will make here, have since in the past and will in the future.
I was gonna say, isn't it Joseph?
It is. I'm dumb. So
I'll cut that out. I'll just say his name wasn't Wagon Wheel. I'll just cut that out.
His name wasn't Wagon Wheel. But so yeah, just to clear that up, I will say many stupid things here and forever. But yeah, to the point of the Wagon Wheel Joe story, and I can think of one in particular in the big combo, which we'll talk about. But he did have a lot of kind of 3D space. Todd McFarlane does that a lot when he would draw comic book characters. He talks about that a lot, where like you have Spider-Man's face, and that's cool. But sometimes you want to draw his hand in front of his face to kind of overlap it a bit, to kind of give 3D space within the frame.
Right.
And this director, I believe his name is Jerry or something, but he seemed to have kind of embraced that a little bit. The 3D aspect of the frame, of putting stuff in the foreground, maybe moving it in front, having stuff in the background, and what seems simple, and it is, but it's really effective in that it's not showy, but it definitely lends kind of more depth to the frame itself.
Like a perfect example, there's a shot in here where he is looking at his shoes and doesn't really tell you what's happening. But you could imagine that shot being from behind him or beside him, and he's looking at a shelf full of shoes. But instead, he shoots from behind the rack, through the rack. So you see the shoes in the foreground, and you see our main character behind that rack. And as he's looking through the shoes, which is way more interesting. It's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Putting that shoe rack in the foreground in our faces, and then us looking through that at the character. And it's more interesting. It tells more. It's just better visual storytelling,
Well, the woman at the innkeeper, who should have actually been the love interest of Henri Cassin, there's a section where she goes into Cassin's room looking for certain things, and freaking Wagon Wheel Joe, he shoots the camera behind the bedpost, so you see her moving through the room, through the bars of the bedpost.
I remember that, yep.
And then it's just like Wagon Wheel Joe at it again. So you gotta give that guy props. But before we go on to
it's weird because the way you tell the story, it sounds like it's a pejorative, but no, it's actually like really effective way to shoot movies. Yeah. And it's weird that came from. I don't know if that's what it came from or if it was something he already had in his toolbox, but a way to get around another problem. But it turned out to be a really effective tool or a technique to use. Yes. It's just really cool when the mother of invention is whatever the mother of invention is.
Yes, whatever the mother of invention is. Eric Holmes, I think Bruce Perky and I were going to do a GoFundMe, or maybe we're going to raise money. Me and Bruce, when you end up directing your much anticipated film, Eric Holmes, we're going to give you a wagon wheel for your film, and you better shoot some of that stuff in that secluded room. I'm not going to talk. What about
just a random wagon wheel in the movie? It doesn't make any sense.
I'm just going to take the wagon wheel in front of the camera, and you can see the wagon. It'll be wagon wheel vision.
Right, tracking shot to the, I'm not going to
tracking on the wheel.
Yeah, but that's all. Okay, so before we go into the big combo, Bruce Perky, send us out overall thoughts again on this film, So Dark Tonight.
I really think it has a goofy charm, I guess is what I would say to it. I think once you kind of get past the expectations and you let the whole thing play out over you, and you like sit back and think about it, there's some of the stuff is obviously preposterous. I mean, some of the twists are a little bit like, oh my gosh, no, not really. But it's honestly, it's really a lot of fun, and
Cool.
I really liked it. And I appreciate the artistic stuff too. But as a story, it's almost, I don't know how to describe this. It's almost to the level of being a Twilight Zone. It almost could be a
Oh.
Twilight Zone. It's so weird.
Oh, yeah. Not almost. You're absolutely right.
You know what I'm saying? Like I could see
Yes.
that. And in that aspect, I really it really won me over. And at first I was like, I don't know, man. This is just gonna be this corny romance. And it didn't end up being that. So I really appreciated that.
That's cool. And yeah, Eric, you'd give a nice little recommend to So Dark the Night?
Oh, not even a nice little. I give it a big recommend, and it's weird because it morphs throughout the movie. The beginning of the movie is a completely different. The first half of the movie is a completely different movie than the second half. So I to where I think the first half of the movie will appeal to one sort of moviegoer, and then it'll slowly morph into something that appeals to the exact opposite type of moviegoer.
Yes.
So in that case, it's got something for everyone.
But then by
And
the end, if you're
actually-
a weirdo, like you can like the whole thing because it's weird. It's this weird combo platter, you know?
Yeah, and I'm the weird
and-
one. I've
I'm-
shown a lot of stuff.
I'm going to go out on a limb, and in spite of the weird creepiness to it, this would actually be a really good date movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Eric Holmes. Thank
I'm
you.
gonna drop that out there. You
Yes.
meet some nice person on Tinder. It's like, hey, you want to Netflix and chill? Well, actually, we're gonna have to YouTube and chill because I don't think this movie's on Netflix.
Yes. Yeah, it's on YouTube. Yes.
But yeah, it's So Dark the Night is a good movie to YouTube and chill to.
Okay, very good. By the way, thank you, Eric Holmes. So Dark the Night and the Big Combo. You can check it out. It's on Blu-ray, DVD. You can purchase it. Okay, but there are some really good qualities out there on YouTube. It's fine. I didn't have any problems watching it on YouTube. Good quality, free. So check out both these movies. They're available as we speak on YouTube. Before we get to the Big Combo, one little movie factoid. Another thing, Eric Holmes, I don't know who's shooting. Are you DPing your own movie? One of the big pieces of advice is to have a great DP, because the DP of So Dark the Night is Burnett Guffey. I believe he won the Oscar twice, or he's an Oscar-winning DP. The DP for the Big Combo is this guy named John Alton. Okay, John Alton, he is considered one of the great cinematographers for film noir. So Burnett Guffey for So Dark the Night and John Alton. Now here's a little interesting factoid that I pulled up on IMDb. John Alton was initially hired to lens the Burt Lancaster film Birdman of Alcatraz, which I have not seen. I don't think any of us have seen it. Directed by John Frankenheimer. John Alton had the job. Ultimately, over creative differences, he was replaced by Burnett Guffey. So both those DPs who worked with, they probably definitely knew each other, and one took another person's job. So regarding John Alton as the cinematographer, he is the DP, and he was behind the Big Combo. The Big Combo, it's a very simple story. The Big Combo means the big combination. This is what happens. You if you live in New York, you're going to be part embroiled. You live in the big city, there's going to be crime and corruption. There is this crime boss named Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown sounds like a character from a Quentin Tarantino film. Mr. Brown is played by this guy named Richard Conte, and he is pursued through most of this film, this crime lord, Mr. Brown. He's pursued by this police lieutenant named Leonard Diamond, played by Cornell Wilde. So that's the entire movie. It's Mr. Brown versus the Lieutenant Diamond, played by Cornell Wilde. And also starring in this film, there's a woman it's part of a weird love triangle, because this policeman, he has a crush on this woman named Susan Lowell, played by Jean Wallace. And Susan is the girlfriend of Mr. Brown. So that is the ultimate movie. You see, there's a lot of violence in this movie. We're going to touch a little bit about some of the incidental actors who are really good in this movie as well. there's two henchmen called Fonte, played by Lee Van Cleef. We'll be talking about Lee Van Cleef as Bruce Perky smiles about Lee Van Cleef. And there's a guy named Fonte who's a killer henchman working for Mr. Brown. And Fonte's right-hand man is this loyal friend called Mingo, played by Earl Holliman. So it's an interesting relationship. I want to ask you guys what you thought about that relationship as well. So who do I start off with first? The big combo. Overall thoughts on the film Eric Holmes, 1955. So this is 9 years after So Dark the Night.
Well, first of all, this movie is definitely like one of those what you think of when you think film noir.
Yes.
Yeah, I got a little bit of dialogue here. She's under arrest, Mr. Brown. What's the charge? Homicide. That's ridiculous. She wouldn't kill a fly. She tried to kill herself. Is that a crime? Happens to be against two laws, God's and man's. I'm booking under the second. That was terrible.
How about this? First is first, second is nobody.
Yeah.
Voice is voice, second is nobody. Remember that. But yeah, they have that kind of have that cadence to their voice, which was definitely fun. The cinematography is definitely what you think of when you think of film noir.
Yes.
And the story, without getting too much into it, is could very easily be complicated, but it got really set. Like you could easily follow it. With anyone else telling the story, I could see where this would just get so convoluted where you're like, I don't understand what's going on. And it almost gets there, but it holds it together just enough to keep the twist, like to have the twist really punch, and everything kind of makes sense throughout. Without saying more than that, I would be giving stuff away. But I really like the story, and I really like the. I talked about the you'll never hear the gunshot sort of scene, which that scene right there was one where I was just like, that is cool.
Yeah.
I love what's there. There's a ton to like about this movie, and if you would, because I'm not as into film noir as you are, Greg. I shouldn't say I'm not into it. I haven't seen enough of them as you have, so I'm pretty new to the genre. But I would say this is a good one to, like, if you've never seen one, this would be a great one to jump into. Very because cool. I dug this one from front to back.
I just love film noir because I love seeing smoke machines work, and I don't know how many smoke machines they used in this movie, because this whole movie they used every smoke machine available. They made San Francisco look like a clear day. This movie, there's smoke everywhere, there's mist, and it's a little, to be honest, I love visual filmmakers. They do a little bit too much misting in the big combo, but it's overboard. I love it. Bruce Perky, did you love the overboardness of the big combo? Was it intentional, or was it a little bit too much for you, or what did you think?
I loved it. I loved it too. This is like Eric said, it's everything you want from noir. It's got the shadows, it's got the lights, it's got the hard-boiled characters, it's got like you said, the snappy dialogue. But what else I think this movie has, it's got a couple things. It's got several super clever and really cool confrontations, and he mentioned there's another one with a hearing aid that I loved as well, and there's one with the spotlight on a car, which I thought was fantastic.
I forgot
and
about
the characters are great, and I'm talking a movie like this partly lives or dies off of your main characters, right? Your good guy and your bad guy. You got to have an awesome bad guy, and this bad guy is pretty darn good. But it also has amazing side characters, like top to bottom. Like some characters only have one scene and they're really good. And then Fonte and Mingo are enough for a movie on their own. They're awesome. And I was so happy. Every time they appeared, I was happy. And the amount of screen time they get and some of the stuff they get to do is just great. I mean, they're almost cartoon characters. They're so
There
great.
was, I don't know where I read this, guys, but there was a theory that Fonte, played by Lee Van Cleef, and Mingo, played by Earl Holliman, they are again the henchmen for Mr. Brown. There's always this conspiracy theory that maybe they were lovers
Oh
because of,
yeah, I thought it
yeah.
immediately. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think
Okay.
it's even veiled. I think it's pretty obvious that they
Wow.
are most likely lovers because of the way one character reacts about what happens to one of the other characters later in the
Sure.
movie. I mean, that's super. Otherwise, it's just, I mean, over the top. I guess it could be over the top in just friendship, but it seems like more than that. And it's fine because this movie does all those things, right? This is also what you want from a noir. Noirs are awesome because they're outside of the system. These are
Yeah.
B movies, so they get to really ride the line in code era filmmaking. So they have not named prostitutes, you know, they have not named mistresses, they have not named possibly gay characters. There's a lot of things in there that are like all of these lurid, you know, dime store novel elements, but they can
Yeah.
get them in there. So
Well,
I
Bruce,
loved it.
to your point, Jean Wallace, who plays Susan Lowell in the film, she's the main woman in the film, and she's the girlfriend of Mr. Brown. She had little bit of a creative, not argument with Joseph Lewis. Joseph H. Lewis. She was wondering. She had no idea why Susan would end up. She used to be a piano player. Why would she end up with this criminal, this guy who kills people? Why would she still stay with him? And Joseph H. Lewis had to come up with a backstory. They were trying to figure this out. And Lewis came up with the idea that, well, Mr. Brown being a gangster and a criminal, maybe there's something about him that he is so hungry for power, that he has an insatiable appetite, that hunger leads to, actually Gene Wallace came up with the idea, not Lewis. She said maybe the reason why he is so voracious and my character likes him is because he's voracious in bed as well,
Yeah.
with sex. So maybe that's why she hates being with him, but when they have sex, when they're together that way, she feels forever linked to him. And that comes to a scene, listeners, in this movie. It's not spoiling it. There's a sequence where she is wondering that this very same thing. She doesn't want to be with Mr. Brown. And you have a scene where, I don't know if maybe he kisses her on the lips roughly, and then, or he kisses her, and there's a shot of him going right behind her and kissing on the neck. And you see a close-up, a push-in close-up to her character, and you see Richard Conte, Mr. Brown's face, going down south in the frame, and it implies that Mr. Brown is going downtown, as one would say. No sex. Mr. Brown is going downtown. Okay.
There was a little bit when we talked about Hands of Orlac once upon a time. There was a little bit of that. It wasn't explicit that she was sad that he lost his hands.
Right.
Why she was sad that he lost his hands, but it was heavily implied that that there was more than just he can't play piano anymore.
Yeah, and that Bruce.
I was gonna say we could also add into that same kind of category with Diamond, with his little side affair with the showgirl. There's like some strong foot fetish stuff going on there too, right? I mean, come on.
The showgirl is played by Helene Stanton. Helene Stanton is the late mother of Dr. Drew. Throwing a little bit of movie factoids all around here. Yeah, but again, Bruce, there's so many really interesting characters. It seems to me that both of you maybe like this movie more than So Dark the Night. Am I wrong on that assumption? Eric, what do you think? Is it a stronger film?
I love this movie.
Wow.
And and I really like So Dark the Night too. But So Dark the Night, as I mentioned, like it starts off in a genre I'm not too keen on, and it turns into a genre that I really love. This one, just front to back, I'm all about it. And oddly enough, and this sounds weird to say, I could see a really good remake being done. This one, and it sounds fucked up to say that. Oh, the movie's really good, they should remake it. But there's so many things that, like the stories, like I said, it's convoluted, but it makes sense. Yes. And I could see someone doing a remake of this and just really making an awesome movie out of it. And then Yeah, it'd be like Wages of Fear and Sorcerer. You get
Yeah.
two awesome movies out of the same story. You could do that with this easily.
And you gotta, like you said, you gotta acknowledge this has like at least 2 or 3 just badass lines and moments. And the one you brought out, of course, with the taking the hearing aid out before
Yeah.
the shots is just, I mean, that could be in any movie, any action movie now, and be an awesome moment. One other thing I wanted to bring up, and you were talking about the really crazy, awesome, snappy, noirish dialogue. I want to bring up one other one that kind of struck me, and that's the one where
Yeah.
he's talking about her mink. Remember her mink?
Okay.
And he's saying like, you just think those are a bunch of dead animal skins on you. And he goes in that whole rant
Oh.
about how that's all the people's skins that have all
Right.
been abused by the gangster, and the deaths, and it's
Yeah.
super
Yeah.
melodramatic, but super awesome and evocative. And that's just the kind of writing that you don't have to have in a movie like this, but to have those little moments, just give it that extra bravura, that extra like verve that you need from a movie like this, where it just kind of punches it up. And I love that kind of stuff.
This begs a question. I wonder if a lot of filmmakers, I mean, he died, I think in 2000, he was 93. Towards the end of his life, he went on a whole bunch of film festivals and they would praise him for that movie, Gun Crazy. I was just wondering maybe Quentin Tarantino, I'm assuming he must
He
have loved,
had to have. Had
I
to
know,
have.
okay. I know Scorsese and Jay Cox, they were big fans of Joseph H. Lewis, but it's cool, it's cool to know that I think his style is still speaks today. Um, I just picked these two movies because they weren't the most the Big Combo is popular, but So Dark the Night is a little bit of an obscure one. So the other movies down the road, hopefully that down the road we might cover is Gun Crazy and My Name is Julia Ross. By the way, My Name is Julia Ross, I think is a better film than So Dark the Night. But they're both only and My Name is Julia Ross is only 65 minutes, and it's an amazing film. So before we go, final thoughts on Joseph H. Lewis. I'm trying to think of things to wrap up with, but I just love him. As my final thought on Joseph H. Lewis is I've only seen 4 of his movies. He directed I think 37 or 38 movies. I'm gonna eventually get to him, and he ended up. What happens is towards the end of his life, he retired early, around 56 or 57, because he made a lot of money, but he had heart problems. He ended up spending the rest of his life being a film lecturer and living with his wife and kid in L.A. And they had a yacht. They had a yacht docked out in Marina del Rey, so they'd go boating all the time. So he led a pretty good life. The only reason I would just wish he directed more, it's because he had a heart attack. He had a heart attack and he had to rest a year, and it was just sad that he had to retire at an early age. He could have still been making movies, I think, all the way throughout his 60s. He ended up actually directing television for the next decade, and then retired 56 or 57. So final thoughts, Bruce and Eric, on Joseph H. Lewis before we go.
I would just say, really cool. Thank you for introducing. I hadn't really come across his stuff, and I think it just goes to the point one more time that we talked about before, and that is some of the most cool and interesting filmmaking is getting done on the fringes. It's getting done by the noir directors. It's getting done by the horror directors. It's getting done by the action directors, because they're just enough out of the system that they can really play with the art form. They can play with techniques, and they can play with like kind of breaking the rules a little bit. So I think discovering these kind of things is really fun. And also for people who love film, it lets us kind of see like, well, like you said, like what led to a Scorsese or a Tarantino or these later directors that are kind of playing in the same realms. They didn't come from nowhere, they came from these kind of movies.
Wow. And Eric,
I,
final
I would
thoughts?
say, I would say that I'm very interested in this director and see what else he has, because there's enough in So Dark the Night and The Big Combo
Yeah.
that really impressed me and I was not ready for, and I would really like to see kind of what else he's got going. Same way I felt about Jules Dassin, the scene.
Yes.
It's probably wrong. All three of those are
Jules,
wrong.
they
But
always call you know what they always call his name Jules Dassin, but I don't
okay.
get to call him Jules Dassin because I still have not seen Rafifi, Eric Holmes. I apologize for that.
But yeah, anytime I see an older movie that looks like it and has certain techniques that look like it could have came out today, it
Yeah,
really makes me want to dive deeper into it. It's like, what else do you have? What else am I missing? Because I was just so blown away of certain aspects of each of the movies, more so with the big combo, but definitely in both movies. And it you get that little tickle in the back of your neck of, if they can
sure.
do this in this movie, what else am I missing? What
I
else have
know.
I just
That's right.
assumed was always within cinematic techniques that may have came in from the 50s or the 40s or 30s or even earlier? You just never know until you dive deep. And this director is definitely one that I would want to deep dive further into,
That is
because
so cool.
these two movies are pretty great.
I just feel bad. I mean, he lived again until he was 93, but everyone praised him for Gun Crazy. I'm sure he's a smart guy. He knew what a great career he had. But when Peter Bogdanovich, by the way, the book is, just for our YouTube watchers, is Who the Devil Made It? Who the Devil Made It? Peter Bogdanovich. Who the Devil Made It? Peter Bogdanovich, Conversations with Filmmakers. And there's 40 pages of an interview with Peter Bogdanovich as night falls. So dark the night comes. Okay, anyways, I'm looking at the video. It's getting darker. But anyways, that's Who the Devil Made It, by Peter Bogdanovich. You can check out an interview with Joseph H. Lewis along with other filmmakers in that book. That was a great resource for this episode. Again, you can watch both those films on YouTube. And unfortunately, this week we're not doing a movie recommendation for Find Your Film. We will be Bruce Perky. Sorry, Eric. Where will we be this week for our movie recommendations? Because where are we going?
We might be over at a little place called Cinematics, and neither Eric nor I are Anderson Cowan, but we'll do our best.
That was
Eric
called Cinema Dicks.
Cinema Dicks. That might be
Cinema Dicks, see? Come on
Cinema
on down
Dicks.
to Cinema Dicks.
Yeah, remember, Holmes, Dark the Night. First is first, and second is nobody. Second is nobody, folks. And
You need to do
do you
that all
promise?
the time.
Do you promise not to swear at Cinematics? It's a family show, Eric. A family show.
No, I do not promise not to swear, but we'll get into that on the next episode of Cinematics.
Okay, so catch us on Cinematics, but since it's only going to be us three, we're just going to call it Cinematics this time. We can say that, Cinematics, on Find Your Film, but maybe Cinematics will. Well, I don't know. Maybe Eric will bring out the swears. I don't know. It'll be a complete celluloid trash fire for this week on Cinematics. Until then, Bruce Perky, where can people find your stuff?
Rustomire, Rustomire.
Okay, and Eric Holmes, anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
I want to say thank you for listening, watching, and I love you guys, and even you listeners.
All right, take care, guys, when we will see you next week. Bye.